How to figure out a cap rate in real estate. You're going to learn here right now a simple way to figure out cap rate and figure out the value of real estate. You're going to see the formula to figure out the cap rate and learn the definition. You're going to use the cap rate to see if you're paying too much or paying too little and about what a property's worth. And you're going to find out why cap rates are used by wealthy investors all the time to figure out if a property is worth money or not worth money. And you're going to be shown and simply revealed right now how you can determine what the current cap rate is and what the potential cap rate is of a property you're looking to buy. So before we get into cap rate, let's talk about NOI. NOI means net operating income. What is net operating income? Because we need that number in order to determine the cap rate. So the net operating income is all the expenses of the property and we have the income. So the income minus the expenses gives us the NOI. And by the way, it does not include the mortgage. Okay, it does not include the mortgage. All right, so the NOI does not include the mortgage. Okay, it only includes the actual expenses. So the mortgage is not included, just the income minus expenses gives us the NOI, or net operating income. The net operating income is then used in a formula to figure out the cap rate. So the net operating income divided by the value gives us the cap rate, okay? So what would be an example of how to do that? So if I have a property, right, that has $100,000 in rent and income and $30,000 in expenses, the NOI would be $70,000. So if we take $70,000 and we divide that by the property being, say, listed for $1 million, we divide these numbers and we get the cap rate. So when we do the math, 70,000 divided by a million is 0.07. So this property is listed for sale at a 7 cap, okay? A 7 cap. So we take the NOI, which again, income minus expenses, okay? But not including the mortgage or the interest payment. We subtract the expenses of 30,000 or 30% of that, and we get 70,000, okay? 70,000 divided by the purchase price of the property gives us a 7 cap. That is how you do the formula to figure out a cap rate or the capitalization rate of the property. Now, when we say what is it, it's an indicator of value. Now, here's another way to do it. You can also figure out what something's worth. You could do it this way. You could take an NOI, let's say the NOI in this next example, let's say the NOI is $67,211, okay? And let's say we don't want to pay more than a 6 cap. So in this case, what we're doing is we're taking the NOI and we're dividing it by a cap rate. So 67,211 is the NOI. NOI again, the income minus the expenses, that's what's left over, not including the mortgage. And we divide that by 0.06, and that tells us at a 6 cap, the value of this property is $1,120,183. So that's about what we would want to pay for the property to figure out if it's the right investment for us or not. Does that make sense? Now, when you look for cap rate, it's very important that you get the net operating income correct. And sometimes people will give you information about an investment and it will be incorrect. So join me and subscribe so you don't make the mistakes that I've made, which is missing some of the critical expenses that should be in determining the NOI, and oftentimes when you get a marketing package, you're left out. So go ahead and subscribe right now and let me help you learn to earn. So when you look at cap rates, you have to watch out for some of the shenanigans that people can do in these marketing packages. And they'll say that when you look at, say, a multifamily property, you'll see that you have, say, $200,000 in income, okay? And they'll say the expenses are something like $51,000. Okay? And so let's just use 50. And they'll say the NOI is 150. Okay? And that's what they'll say the NOI is on that property. These are the expenses. This is the income. Okay? Here's the problem, my friends. Not all the expenses are there because it's very difficult to run a property that brings in $200,000 with 25% expenses. Most of your multifamily properties are anywhere from 35% to 45% expenses, sometimes as high as 50%, depending on the age of the building. If you got older buildings like I have, built in the 60s and 70s and 80s, if you don't have at least 35 to 40% expenses, because you're going to have maintenance in there, okay? The other thing that sometimes they'll put out of the marketing package is management. So when you calculate the NOI and you're doing those calculations, make sure that you have all the expenses. The other shenanigan is called pro forma, okay? Pro forma means that this is probably the likelihood of what your expenses are going to be. You want the actual expenses on the building. And remember that the taxes, when you buy it, are going to go up, right? Your taxes are going to go up. Why? Because you just paid, say you paid $2 million for the building. Your taxes are going to go up if the last person only bought it for $1.5 million. So whenever you're figuring out cap rates, it's important that you figure out the right expenses, get the right information on expenses, and make sure you have the right NOI. Because you may be thinking that something is worth considerably more than it is because they're not showing you all the expenses. Two of the biggest ones they leave out are management. You're going to have it managed, and the increase in taxes when you buy it. So just to make sure we're clear, let's go through one more example so you understand cap rate. Let's say that we have a building that brings in $100,000 in rent, okay? And that building has $45,000 of expenses, or 45%. That's the expenses, okay? So now what does that leave us? It leaves us $55,000 in what? NOI, net operating income, right? So now I want to know what's the cap rate, okay? Well, two things. One, what's the building worth, right? So let's say that I want to pay around 6% for a building. I want a 6% cap rate or higher. So how do? I take 55,000 divided by 6% is going to give me a value, okay? What's the other way to do it? I take the asking price, which let's say on this particular deal is 1.4 million, okay? That's the asking price, and I could do the formula the other way. So let's start with this one, 55,000 divided by 6%. So if we look at this, there's a couple ways we can figure this out, right? If we have 55,000 divided by 6%, that gives us a value. The value of this property at a 6 cap is $916,660, okay? If the asking price of a property is $1.4 million, just a different calculation now, the asking price of a property is $1.4 million, and it has 55,000 in NOI, net operating income. We divide 55,000 by $1.4 million, and we get 4%, means that building is listed as a 4 cap. So that's how that formula is used. That's what it is. And it's used to figure out the value of properties by both appraisers and by real estate investors and realtors and in pricing property. If you can buy a property for a 6 cap or you buy a property for a 4 cap, which one should you do? If you join me on the next video, I'm going to talk about what is a good cap rate for real estate. So I'll see you over there.